This is the MUE Incorporated Welder Safety Orientation. Feel free to get a pen and a piece of paper to write down any questions so the safety department or your immediate supervisor will be able to answer them. To go over a few general safety rules, a safety manual has to be located on the job site, so ensure that you have a safety manual before you start any work. Any complaints that you have, make sure that you direct them to the safety department, but also your immediate supervisor. We expect all employees to report injuries, any accidents or incidents that happen, unsafe acts or behaviors that they observe, an unsafe environment that they feel they're placed in, and any damages that may occur while on the job site. It's important not to use any tools or equipment which you have not been trained. If there's a piece of equipment that is introduced on the job site that you're not familiar with, don't use it until you've been properly trained. It is also important that we do not distract other workers or that no other workers distract you. We want to ensure that all flammable liquids and gases are stored and transported in the approved safety cans or safety cylinders. All engines need to be turned off when refueling, and you never want to leave the fuel nozzle unattended when you're refueling. There's no smoking within 25 feet of any flammable gas or liquid, and also any open excavation when working on gas. It's important to always have a properly stocked first aid kit. If any of the first aid kit is used, the contents used will need to be replenished. You can contact the safety department. Always be aware of the nearest medical facility. This should be documented on your pre-job brief. For our personal protective requirements, we have different requirements when the welder is welding, and we have requirements for the helper, the non-welding requirements, and also when the welder is not welding. So going over the welding, got to ensure that you have gloves, forearm length, leather or FR material. You need to have eye protection, so Z87.1 plus shatter resistant face shield. Foot protection just needs to be leather. There's no requirement for steel or safety toe, although we highly recommend it. And the rest of your clothing has to be FR rated or leather. For non-welding and also the helper, you need to have eye protection provided is the Z87 plus safety glasses. Same thing with foot protection, just leather work boots, does not have to be safety or steel toe. And head protection, the hard hat. You can use your own hard hat, bring it if you have your own, but it needs to be inspected by you on a regular basis to ensure that the harness and also the overall integrity of the hard hat is intact. Visibility, you got to have a class 2 safety vest. Class 2 basically has the reflective tape on it. If you were to use a safety shirt, that is acceptable as long as it has the reflective tape to consider it class 2. If you maintain any cylinders on your truck, we want to make sure that they're upright or in a approved position. They need to be valve capped at all time when not in use, so it's important to always take your regulators off and make sure that they're properly capped. They need to be chained and secured. Also, per DOT regulations, there needs to be a legible label. So if you have any labels that are starting to come off or completely removed, we need to get that cylinder replaced or at least get the label replaced. We need to keep a safe distance from welding operations and clear of electrical hazards like a sparking electrode. For torching operations, the only approved sparking tool that we have are the friction lighters. If you do not have a friction lighter, one will be provided for you. Do not, under any circumstances, use matches or any other sparking device. For ladders, which you will not be carrying with you, the crews will have these on site. We use type 1A non-conductive ladders due to the fact that the ladder may come in contact with an exposed electrical cable in the ground. These ladders are required in all excavations 4 foot and greater, so if you're being told to get in a 4 foot or greater excavation, make sure that they place a ladder in there for you. This ladder needs to extend at least 3 feet out of the excavation towards the landing area so you can get off and on safely. You know that it's 3 feet when there's 3 rungs protruding outside of the excavation. It's always important to inspect the ladder before each use. You want to check the rung caps and also the rungs themselves. The rungs are made out of aluminum, so you want to check for cracks, bends, or splits. In the structure, look for defects. It is a fiberglass composite, so you want to make sure you're looking for any cracks, bends, or splits in that. It is always important to have a ladder tied off in some fashion, whether on the top or the bottom or a combined top and bottom. You always want to face the ladder and maintain 3 points of contact so that you do not fall off the ladder. Ensure the proper base before climbing, so if it's an uneven base at the bottom, make sure they use the cleats at the base of the ladder. You never want to overreach the sides. This is the belt buckle rule, or never go farther to the side than your belt buckle. You want to have the 4-to-1 ratio, and this has to do with the angle in which the ladder can be placed. So for every 4 foot in height, you need to have the base of the ladder out at least 1 foot. Never use a ladder as scaffolding, such as across an excavation or across a trench line. Housekeeping is very important, especially with welders, because you guys have your lines that are running to the excavation from your truck, sometimes in great length. And the last thing that we want to do is have our employees trip and fall on them, or have the public that might be around the job site and the time the work's being performed. So make sure you're keeping your work area clean, prevent any slips, trips, or falls. Keep the extension cords together. I also suggest that, grab a cone from the job site and place a cone, every 5 to 10 feet along where your electrode lines are going into the excavation to prevent any tripping. It's important that you never bury any debris in the ground. So if you have a monster or you have a snack or anything like that, which you shouldn't be eating inside an excavation, don't walk up to an excavation and throw your trash in there and then have it buried. Always keep a trash collection bag. All the fire extinguishers that we provide are class A, B, C fires, so they can fight class A, B, and C. The fire extinguisher that will be provided for you and that needs to be placed on the outside of the excavation that you're welding in is a 20-pound fire extinguisher. This is pressurized to 200 psi and is filled with and pressurized with nitrogen gas. It has a pressure gauge on the side that always needs to be viewed to make sure it's in the green. It's very easy to be able to tell whether the fire extinguisher is in good working condition. You have an effective range all the way from 5 to 20 feet. This is dependent on environmental conditions such as wind and humidity. Extinguishers, the agent that we use smothers the fuel source, so it's important that you aim at the base of the fire, and we'll discuss that shortly. Looking at the fire extinguisher anatomy, starting with the top, you have the discharge lever. Moving down to the left, the discharge lever and locking pin and seal. So basically, you have your locking pin that you will have to pull in order for you to depress the discharge lever. Then you have the discharge hose. This is made of rubber. Make sure that the hose and the rubber is not dry rotted so that the agent can come out any other place other than the orifice. The discharge nozzle, this is made of plastic. Sometimes it gets chipped. If it gets chipped, broken, cracked, anything like that, make sure that you get that replaced. And then you have the orifice. The pressure gauge, so that pressure gauge needs to read in the green. If it's above, then it's overcharged. If it's below, then it's undercharged and needs to be serviced. You have the data plate on the side. The data plate is required and very important. It has the instructions for fighting the fire and for what fires the fire extinguisher will be able to address. If that data plate is starting to get worn or is completely removed, make sure you let someone know so it can be replaced. Also look over the whole cylinder body to make sure there's not any scratch, dents, creases in the metal, anything that could affect the overall integrity. Keep in mind that these cylinders are filled with 200 psi, and if something were to happen or there would be a leak, it could become very dangerous. When attempting to use a fire extinguisher, you always want to remember the acronym PASS. Pull the pin, aim the nozzle, squeeze the handle, sweep side to side. When you pull the pin, make sure you pull firmly. Sometimes the tamper seals can be a little bit different and they can be a little bit difficult. This will allow you to depress the discharge handle. You want to aim at the base of the fire, which is where the fuel source is. When you depress the handle or squeeze the handle, you want to squeeze it all the way. Use all of the agent, even if the fire is out. If you have some agent left, it will not be good, as the nitrogen will eventually leak all the way out. So you might as well use all of the agent on the fire to ensure that is completely out and smothered. Sweeping side to side is the best and a most efficient means of covering the entire fire with the agent. Also, sweeping side to side will prevent you on focusing in one area of the fire and possibly spreading it out to each side of the area that you were focused. At the end of the day, you don't want to be a hero. You only want to be able to fight a fire that you think that you could possibly manage. If you feel that the fire is too big, it's past its incipient stage, the best thing that you could do is call 911 and get the professionals out there. That's a determination that you are going to have to make on the job site, but calling 911 is the most important thing. When fighting a fire, the most important rule is just leave yourself an out. Make sure that you're going to be upwind from where you're going to be sitting with the fire extinguisher and on fire watch. But you want to make sure that nothing's behind you, like a piece of equipment, material, anything like that. That if the wind did change and you were engulfed by any means, you need to be able to have an escape route and always maintain that escape route throughout the entire day. All of our employees have stop work authority, all the way from the president of the company to someone that we hire tomorrow. So the ability to stop the job is very important when we want our employees to understand that they have that authority. So if a dangerous situation exists, something doesn't look or feel right, if you don't have the right tools for the job present, you want to stop the job and get those. And also required materials. If they're not present, we need to get the required materials. We don't want to push on with materials that are, other than the required ones. Every employee has this, and the newest eyes on the job site are some of the best at identifying a dangerous situation. This all comes down to complacency. People that have been doing this for 20 years, they get complacent. They see a dangerous situation, but they don't do anything to change it. This may, spark, the ability to stop work for the a new person that's on the job site and see something very dangerous with it. We're now going to go over trenching and excavating, and it's trenching by the numbers is the best way to remember things. You have the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rule. So one is the requirement for a competent person to be on the job site. Two is going to be how far the spoil piles and all materials and equipment have to remain from the edge of the excavation. It has to be 2 feet, no less. For 4-foot excavations, you have to have a ladder in the hole. That ladder has to extend at least 3 feet out of the hole. Remember, 3 rungs. At the end of the day, you guys aren't going to be doing the trenching or the excavating, but you're going to be asked to go in there to perform work. Do not, for any reason, enter an excavation that doesn't meet these minimum guidelines. For 5-foot excavations, we have to have a little extra protection. The first I'm going to talk about is a trench box or a shoring box. The 2-foot rule still applies here for all materials, equipment, and spoil piles. For the actual box itself, the box may not go all the way to the bottom because of the facility that's running through the ground. The distance from the very base of the excavation to the base of the box cannot be greater than 2 feet, and that is to prevent any dirt from coming in from the bottom. If that is the case and you're told to get in an excavation and you know it's greater than 2 feet, or you measure it out to be greater than 2 feet, we need to place some paneling there to make sure that we get that area covered up. That trench box or shoring box has to protrude at least 18 inches out of the excavation or the surface, and also ensure that you use a ladder for entering and exiting the shoring box. For our gas operations, shoring is not very common. You more than likely won't see it, but if you do see it, shoring rods can be anything from hydraulic, pneumatic, and mechanical, and shoring plates could be wood, steel, aluminum. Also ensure that you have a ladder in here. The 2-foot rule still applies for materials, equipment, and the spoil piles, and ensure that all criteria is met previously discussed. For benching, I'm not going to get too in depth. Benching in Michigan is something that is not probable due to the fact that we have a lot of Class C soil here, and if Class C soil is present in any excavation, you are not able to bench or shelve. So if you see anything like this and you're asked to get into the excavation, but you notice that there is some Class C soil, it's important that you stop the job and let them know that you will not be entering that excavation until it has been properly shored, either with shoring or a shoring box. For angular repose, it's the same thing. It's just, the shelving and benching is based off of angular repose. But if you're told to get in an excavation with this, which is highly unlikely, make sure that it is properly reposed. If you need to go back and look at the safety manual or need to go back and look at the consumer's GOM, please stop the job, take the time to do that. Make sure you have the right angle and the excavation that you're told to get in. At the end of the day, it's just much easier to put a box in the hole or do any type of shoring instead of going and doing angle of repose. You'll see angle of repose more for pipeline work. Electrical cord safety is one of the most highly cited items from MIOSHA. So we want to make sure all our electrical cords are intact. It's also a very big safety hazard to have any exposed electrical wiring for any of our employees. So it's important that the integrity of all our extension cords is inspected and properly maintained so it doesn't become an issue. If this sheathing is pulled back, as you see in the picture below, this extension cord will need to be either retightened or it'll need to be completely replaced. If any of the following are noticed, such as the sheathing is cut and it shows the wires beneath, if it's pinched or flattened, you're not sure of the integrity, it'll need to be replaced. And then finally, having grounded tools is very important to ensure that you do not get electrocuted or you do not receive an electric shock. So if those ground prongs are damaged or missing, they will need to be completely replaced. GFCIs are very useful safety devices that shut off the flow of electricity anytime a fault is indicated, such as energy being released on one of our employees. So all of our power sources have to be GFCI protected. If you are plugging into something that is not GFCI protected, you need to get an external GFCI and place it between the extension cord and the actual power source. All electrical tools sources need to be GFCI protected. For hazard energy control lockout tagout, it's very simplified in the construction industry. It can get very extensive in chemical plants and other places like that. But for our line of work, it's simple as if a truck's being worked on, pull the key out of the ignition. Any other source of electricity, if you're working on any piece of equipment, anything like that, you always want to secure the power source. And make sure that it cannot be energized when anyone's working on it or if a piece of equipment is defective. The same thing with tagging. Any piece of equipment that you use, say it starts to spark, smoke, anything like that, you want to make sure that you secure it, but you also want to tag it and letting people know that, hey, this piece of equipment is defective. It could possibly harm you. Also, you'll put your name on it. You'll put a description on what's wrong with it. This will help identify that, hey, this piece of equipment needs to be repaired or replaced so it can get back out in the field. But the most important thing is just communicating and making sure no hazardous energy is released on any of our employees. The welder safety orientation is very simplified compared to our other employee orientation, but we feel that it covers all the most pertinent points. If you feel that something needs to be covered that hasn't been covered, feel free to let us know. Also, if you have any questions whatsoever, the safety department is here for you. And also you can contact your immediate supervisor to get those questions answered. Appreciate your time and welcome to the family.